Hello everyone, just give me a second to check that all of the tech is working. And I'll be with you. Feel free to start opening and pouring your whiskies out whilst I do this. Okay, cool. So it appears to be loading, that's good. Oh, can't work out how to pause it, but that's fine. And yeah, excellent. Right, let's get that all loaded so I can have your comments good and ready. And I'll start the other video too. Excellent. So I hope we're all doing very well, staying safe, staying home, all of that stuff. Welcome to the very first virtual whiskey tasting by myself, Greg Dillon, and GreatDrams. Thank you very much for taking part. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes before we dive into the whiskies, just for any stragglers who are not necessarily 7 means 7 start. I can see that 89 of you are already involved, which is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. And what we're going to do is go through 5 whiskies from our range. Okay, so we're just going to give people another few seconds. I'm going to then start picking up a glass. Make sure you have your glasses, your whiskies, your water, any snacks you're having, and even your pacer drinks, as mentioned in the message earlier and the email sent out to everyone taking part. I might have a sip of my pacer drink just to, wet the old whistle, as they say. Cheers. Cool. Right. I think we've given people enough time. There's 124 of you now watching, so thank you again for taking part. Lots of people saying hi. Hi back. I clearly can't type back to every single one immediately, but hi, and again, thank you for your time. So, just to give you a brief introduction, and we are GreatDrams. We are an award-winning family business who select, mature, bottle and release amazing single cask whiskies. It is just myself and my wife Kirsty in the business, and between us we do absolutely everything within the company. We have the occasional person who helps us out doing events and a bit of research, but by and large everything is done by the two of us. So we're pretty, we like what we do. We're very fortunate to be able to do what we do in an industry that we love, with people that are just incredible. Now, before I prattle on more about us, make sure you have your first whiskey in hand. And for those who asked me earlier on Facebook, email, Twitter, Instagram, all over the place, what order we're doing them in. We're going first with Girvan, then Port Dundas, then batch 2 from our blended cask series, then Glentauchers, and then we're finishing with the London Distillery private cask bought by me personally, and we'll finish there. And so through this evening, please ask absolutely anything. I'll do my absolute level best to answer everything. I'll go through the questions that you ask between each whiskey, so as to let you guys taste it, try it, while I'm reading the questions so I can answer. And if I do not get to your question, I sincerely apologise. What will happen is tomorrow I will go through absolutely every single one of them and make sure I respond. So a load of them will be read out and answered tonight, and then the rest will be responded via text over on the Facebook page that you're all looking at right now. Excellent. So pick up the Girvan, and so for me it's the one right here, obviously. Pre-poured, make it easy on myself. And now whilst you're nosing that, I'm just going to have a quick look in to see what people have been saying so far. So there's now 165 of you involved, which is superb. More people saying hi, hello, and good evening to one and all. Absolutely superb. Cool. Right. So, as I say, we're independent bottlers. So what we do is select casks from different distilleries around Scotland currently. And we then mature them in a warehouse up there until we are absolutely 100% satisfied that they are the best that they can be for what we're looking to achieve with each of our releases. Have a sip on the Girvan. We don't like anyone having dry lips around here. So have a sip on it, start to think about it. It's bottled at 46.2 ABV, and I'll just finish what I'm saying about us while you're doing that. So very fortunately, we've been winning awards since we started. Actually, our very first release, which was the Invergordon, which is somewhere along our archival wall of releases. I imagine actually it's obviously the first one, and that would make a hell of a lot of sense. So that was the first release that we put out there, and it managed to get a silver medal in the Independent Bottlers Challenge that year. So right from the very first release, we've been winning awards for what we've been doing, and we're always really humbled. And we don't really celebrate them. We like getting the stickers for the bottles or the trophy or whatever, but we don't really celebrate it that much. We just say, cool, job done, big tick, what's next? And just to repeat for anyone who is late joining, we're going Girvan, Port Dundas, batch 2 from the blended cask series. Then we're going to Glentauchers, and then cask 109 release from the London Distillery, which is a private cask bought by myself from there years ago. Okay, so I hope you've all had a nose, had a sniff, had a kind of a waft of the Girvan right now. For us, this one, just as soon as we nosed it, before we even tasted it, the butteriness, the creaminess, the easiness of this whiskey just blew us away. We affectionately refer to it as like drinking boozy butter, because it was just so buttery and creamy and smooth and easy drinking. This little guy actually got double gold at the Great Taste Awards last year. Boom. And Jim Murray, that man in the hat, awarded it 91.5 points in the single grain category of Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible 2020. So we're monumentally chuffed with how this guy did. And only a couple of bottles left on the website actually, and they're all from the archive after we decided to trim the old archive. One thing that we always at pains to point out whenever I or Kirsty host whiskey tastings is that whiskey is so subjective, really subjective. What I get from a whiskey will be totally different to what you get, to what your mate in a different house currently whilst in isolation is getting, and lockdown and all that, is getting from it. And it's because we all go through different journeys throughout our lives. Now, not to get all philosophical and all that kind of jazz, that's not my bag, or not my public bag anyway. But like my palate will have developed over the last 3.5 decades in a completely different way to how yours would have been. The foods we like will be different. The drinks we like will be different. The ABVs we like from our drinks will be different. The countries we've been to will be different. Everything will actually be different and have a really subtle change or subtle difference along the way to our palates developing. And so there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to what does this whiskey taste like? How does it make you feel? For me, it's all about memory triggers. It reminds me about certain things. As I said, boozy butter was the way that I verbalized this one because it just made sense. In my head, that was it. It was like a brandy cream type thing you have at Christmas, and then for the 6 to 8 weeks after Christmas, because you end up loving it the first time you have it, and then you stock up on it, thinking, oh, that's a great idea. I have loads of that. Why do we not have this more in our life? Then you realise it's so rich and all that kind of stuff, and you think, oh Christ, I shouldn't have had so much. But anyway, it's those kind of triggers that come to me and how I describe whiskies when writing about them, but also in commentating about them, and also when deciding on which casks that we choose to bottle. So this one, the Girvan, is 11 years old, 46.2% ABV, only 273 bottles ever produced. And as I say, we describe it as boozy butter, but for me it is just super easy, super swift. Like when you're drinking it, you just want that next sip responsibly, always responsibly, and it just kind of makes sense. So I'm going to dive in after I've now done my kind of initial chat. Let me know in the comments what you're getting, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Do you like it? Do you not? One point also to say is that we always say to people that they should try whiskies neat first, even if it's just a sip. Even the last one tonight, which is at a whopping 63.3% ABV, and then add water to taste. So depending on my mood, I'll add either a few drops, 1 or 2 aren't going to really do anything, or up to about 15%, maybe 20% water if it's a real beast like the last one. And I do that because that helps it onto my palate. I don't always do it, but if I'm in that mood, I do. And when we're judging whiskey, so I sit on the IWSC Whiskey and Spirits panel, as well as the Spirits Business Masters, as well as the World Whiskey Awards panel. So I'm very fortunate I get to try a lot of whiskey. A lot of it I don't even know what it is, because you try them all blind, you haven't got a clue. But when you do the IWSC, for example, you actually try them at about half strength, so between 20-25% when you're assessing them, because A, it means that your palate is fresher longer, but B, you can understand how the complexities come to life. So try it. I'm going to have a quick look at the comments and see if I can answer some of your questions. Also, I need to have a drink of this thing. Cheers to everyone getting involved. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, let's hope we have a good night, eh? There's some of you saying it comes to life with a bit of water, really smooth, nice vanilla, easy sipping. That buttery hits it right on the head. Thanks, Bob. Andrew saying that there's enough water in whiskey as there is. Fair play. Like your style, but at the same time, you know, we try to have it in different forms. Sadly, Graham, there is no GreatDrams sanitizer in the pipeline because we don't distill, so we haven't got anything that high ABV. Potentially a limited edition one day, who knows? But it'll also be given free to our frontline amazing NHS heroes. But yeah, sadly no. Although a couple of distilleries that I work with and help set up have converted their production into creating sanitizer for frontline staff, first responders and everyone, including the Boatyard Distillery over in Enniskillen. So they've already, I think, put out a few thousand bottles to the local NHS and support services, and they're ramping up production to do more and more of that now. So yeah, sadly not us, but people we know and are involved in are doing it. Let's see. Yeah, buttery, really smooth. That's all cool. First ever grain for Helen. Excellent. Hope that has enlightened you somewhat. By the end of the next whiskey, you'll have had 2 grains in one whiskey tasting, so that's great. And someone's just asking, this one is actually 55 quid a bottle. As we said, it's only 273 bottles ever made, and there are only a couple more left on the website. It's kind of end of line, nearly sold out. And yeah, 11 years old, and yeah, for us, just an absolute beauty. Cool. So let's see if there's any other comments that I can rattle through. Oh, Stuart with Fry's Turkish Delight. Cheeky. Not had that myself. I do get a slight, and that vanilla thing for me, that butterscotch and toffee. Yeah, always comes back to the butter for me. But do add a little bit of water. A number of you are saying that it really opens it up, so let's try it. With this one, I don't normally do that, but I'm always happy to have a go. So just adding the water there. And I'll show you, hopefully that focuses a little bit. That's the bottle, so you know. And so what we do with all of our releases, you have the distillery name, because we actually, apart from our blended casks, obviously, we actually pay more for our casks so that we can use the distillery name, as we believe in as much transparency and openness as we possibly can. Age statements on everything, distilled date, bottled date, individual bottle number, even the cask number, and then information about the distillery on the front, and then on the back, the flavour profile and why I chose to release it as well. So that pretty much is all the information that I have. We give, because we, as I said, we believe in being as open and honest as we can, and we always answer as many questions as we can too. So, lots of you saying it does really open with a bit of water. Okie dokie. Thanks Tim Jones behind our Christmas special edition. This is his second favourite. Cheers, lad. Yeah, to be fair, with that water, I'm now a bit more kind of oakiness, like juicy oakiness, the slight char that comes with oak casks. And it is adding a bit more depth, actually. Still just so smooth. Unbelievable. Right. Are we ready for the next one? They're still firing loads of comments over, so I'm guessing we'll give it a minute or two, or maybe a few seconds. We don't need to give it a minute or two. There's no need for that. I will have a bit of my pacer. Freshen up. So we now have 168 of you watching, by the way. So hello to absolutely every one of you. That's pretty incredible. Cool. Right. Next, a couple of people asking what's next, what the lineup is. So if you're slightly later to join the virtual whiskey tasting from GreatDrams, we've gone through Girvan now, and now we're heading to Port Dundas, which is next. Then our blended cask series number 2, then Glentauchers, and then the London Distillery. Fear not, I will repeat that often so you don't get lost, and it'll be pretty clear what I'm talking about anyway. Okay, right, so I think we are all, we're all ready. And yes, Sarah, that is a Lucky Saint beer that I'm sipping on, non-alcoholic beer to balance the 40 plus ABV whiskey. Makes sense, right? Let me just check on the tech still working before we move on. Marvellous. It's almost like things are going okay. So, I hope you've all poured even, your Port Dundas. It's our 10-year-old Port Dundas, only released a few weeks ago, just before lockdown. Why wouldn't you do that? Only 193 bottles of this guy ever made. It's another single grain, and we chose it because it's a dead distillery. So the distillery itself doesn't exist anymore. This was distilled in October 13th, 2009, and the distillery was torn down just a few months later after a rationalisation of production. Meant that there was no need for it. Personally, I think that's a real shame. I've tried really old Port Dundas, quite young Port Dundas, and then we've got a 10-year-old. And I think it's safe to say the opportunity to buy it made a hell of a lot of sense. We've never had a dead distillery or silent distillery or mothballed distillery, cask or release within our range. So to have the opportunity to do that made a hell of a lot of sense. And so as soon as we tried it, it's like, boom, this is cool. And then we got it and we matured it through a bit further. So felt it needed a bit of rounding off. Bottled it at a slightly higher ABV of 48.2%. So what happens with all of ours is Kirsty and I sit down and we go through the cask sample at the actual ABV that it comes in at, which for this one I think, this is something I did not prepare earlier, 63.1% ABV. So we try it there, we always try it, then we add distilled water to take it down incrementally until we're at a happy place. And so sometimes it could be in the 50s, sometimes it could be in the high 40s. We don't bottle below 46, and that's because below 46% ABV you need to chill filter it, and then it becomes a whole kind of additional expense that isn't needed, and it kind of takes away from that purity thing that we're looking for. So that transparency in all the information and the purity and the spirit, it literally comes straight from the cask, taken to the right ABV, and then it is bottled with only a light filter to remove all the kind of charcoal from the cask and the charring. Occasionally though, you do get the odd cask kind of residue in there, not in this one, but occasionally you do. If I hold up the bottle there, hopefully you can see it. And I wrote a little bit of flowery copy for the back label on this one that reads, "Drams like this, with its smooth palate laden with creme brulee and vanilla notes, are far too rare to burden with heavy-handed words, as Chaucer might have said." Here you have a bottle of whiskey now from a dead distillery or silent distillery, which means there is not only no production there anymore, but the whole site has been torn down, so no more Port Dundas whiskey will ever be produced. So yeah, got a little bit flowery with the copy, but I'm okay with that. And so for me, it's very sweet on the nose. Got quite a nice kind of spirity but lemony note there. For me, there's just a gorgeous easiness to it, like the Girvan, but with a little bit more bite, like a citrus thread that goes through it, like a lemon and a lime citrus note that just kind of keeps going. But again, easy to nose, really smooth. Now vanilla and citrus note, just for me, works so well together. Even a touch of orange coming through too. Remember, leave your comments so I can have a quick look and I'll answer as many as I can. Thanks Gary for loving a bit of flowery copy, always a pleasure. Strong nose of dried fruits from Ryan, interesting. I did get those actually when we were going through the sampling stage. Really fresh, sultanas people getting. It reminds me of tequila, interesting. Getting a hint of salt. Yes, it is very much like it's a very dry whiskey, I would say. To that one, tons of fruit. Definitely try it with a bit of water. A lot of you are already. I think Jono may have had a couple already. This is a Monzer. I don't know if he meant a monster or whatever, but nice one, Jono. Tannins. Mark has asked a really interesting question. Do you go looking for casks to buy, or do they come to you? Mark, it's actually a bit of both. So we, I like to think I'm a bit of a cask hunter, so to speak, but the reality is both. So we get offered casks probably every couple of days, and sometimes with samples, sometimes without, depending on who it is and availability. See, at the minute, due to what's happening with the old virus thing, samples are a lot harder to get a hold of. So thankfully we'd already planned for the year and for most of next, so our stock levels are reasonably good and the pipeline's already in place, so we're not too stressy about that. But then other times we go hunting, we start asking people, what's in your warehouse, what do you not need, what are these casks destined for, and do they need to be destined for that? So in Gordon, from what we were led to believe, sometimes you are sold a dream, but I do like that as well. Being a marketeer myself, I was destined for a White and Mackay blend. We don't know what one. So, it now didn't go that way. It didn't end up in the blend, ended up as an award-winning single cask. We don't know what the Girvan was being used for otherwise, but we had the option, had a really good age statement to it. The nose, the palate just worked for us. So we got it, but we reject a hell of a lot more than we accept, and then we have all kinds of different casks from different distilleries maturing in a warehouse up in Scotland, just waiting. And then it depends on which release it is. Bit of a long answer to your question, but hopefully it's helpful. So for example, our Craigellachie release, which was this guy right here. I should put the sticker on it. Also got an award. This one we bought when it was a first fill, 10-year-old, so matured in a first fill ex-bourbon cask. Really feisty, an aggressive thing. It just felt like it was attacking me, but I still liked it at the same time. And I love the distillery, love everything about that brand and that distillery. so I wanted it anyway. So then I felt like I should indulge my love, and Kirsty's favourite whiskey is the Craigellachie 23-year-old, and it's definitely up there with mine as well. And so I had a purpose-built Oloroso sherry cask, first fill, made just for this whiskey. And then we put it in there, and then I suddenly started bricking it, because I realised that I'd never finished a whiskey before, and we hadn't finished any whiskies. And so I wasn't sure if it would take any flavour, or if it would take all the flavour and it would kill the character of the actual original spirit and the distillery character. So got samples sent down every 4 weeks or 3 weeks maybe, whereas normally I only request samples every 3 to 6 months, because it's much longer lead times. Obviously whiskey takes time. So I was absolutely bricking it. And then at 5 months I'm like, boom, this tastes amazing. Let's just see what happens. And so then I got samples every single week for the next 4 weeks. And then at 6 months, we said, right, out, bottle this thing right now. Because it just worked and was mind-blowing and just made sense. And we are finishing about 3 other whiskies currently, and they're at different stages. I'm not as scared this time because I do kind of know what's going on a bit more. But it is worth pointing it out that some of it's a bit of trial and error. And so also with all of our releases, we bottle at 100% natural colour. So we don't add any E150C food grade caramel colouring, which the bigger brands do. And they don't do that for a negative reason, in my view. It's for harmony, consistency, and so that consumers, or whiskey drinkers, the proper term really, see 2 bottles next to each other, and they may be from different batches, and they look the same. Because if you're buying, I don't know, a generic blend, and that's the whiskey you go to every single time, you want to know that it's the same whiskey every time. And you don't want to get there and be like, oh wait, hold up, one of them's darker, one of them's lighter, which is what the case would be and should be, as every single cask matures differently. Even if it's the same spirit in there for the same time, same type of casks, sat right next to each other, they will come out a different colour and with slightly different flavour characteristics. But generally, whiskey drinkers want to have consistency in the bigger brands so that they understand what they're buying. Whereas for us, if you look at the archive wall and sample wall up here, I love different colours of whiskey. And Kirsty and I made a really conscious effort when we were setting this up and doing everything, that we wanted absolutely everything to be natural and not add any colouring to it at all, which is why Port Dundas is quite light. It is quite a light whiskey, but it's not an indication of no flavour, as I hope you're finding out. And that's 10 years old. The Girvan's 11. Let me just show you one example I used the other day. This one, yeah, we'll do this one versus the Port Dundas. Which one do you think is older? Give you a few seconds. So, a few of you seem to have got it. The Port Dundas is older. This is actually a 2-year-old. But it was in a first, or is still in, a first fill sherry cask, and it's taken a ton of colour already. It was actually a cask bought for my firstborn son. It was distilled about 6 days after he was born, but already after 2 years I love the flavour so much he only now owns half of it, because I genuinely want the rest. Right, put that back. So hopefully you're enjoying the Port Dundas. Just had a question from Andrew asking how many whiskies we've released. It's a good question. Sadly, there's no tally chart, so I'm actually going to have to count them. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, 8. There's actually 8 official releases, and then number 9 has been bottled, but we haven't really started talking about that yet. So 8 in brackets 9. And I would love to release an Irish whiskey, but there's a hell of a lot of different types of paperwork behind that. And you actually have to have a licensed premise in Ireland, which makes it pretty tricky, because I definitely do not need to own a pub in Ireland. Yeah, one day though, and we are working on it. There's a couple of leads that we're following, but I think we work at a different, how we say it, different pace in how we respond to things. Graham's asked, are there any Ilah distilleries in the pipeline? I would love there to be. I really would. The Ilah whiskies are phenomenal. We absolutely love them. I'm toying with it. The issue is that they don't become available that often, sadly, because everyone wants them. And so when they are available, they're either gone like that, or they have a ridiculous price, kind of over-indexed versus all the others, to be totally transparent, that commercially it makes absolutely no sense. So we're waiting for the right opportunity, and fingers crossed we will get there. So Matthew has asked, when you buy a cask, do you have to go along tasting many casks before you put your name on one? And if you do, what a real chore that must be. And if you need a hand, let me know. Matthew, firstly, it was lovely chatting to you earlier, by the way. I'm glad that you were at your door when I did the bottle drop off. I enjoyed catching up and talking about whiskey. And also I think you were the second person outside of my household that I've actually spoken to in real life for about 3.5 weeks. So that was great too. Bob, who's also on here, was the first person. So apart from that, to answer your question, it is an absolute chore, mate. It's tough. It's one of those things that, you know, as I said earlier, I'm really fortunate to do what I do and to be paid for it, but also to just love it and love everything about it and be able to have turned, we describe it very succinctly as whiskey was a hobby that turned into a passion, that turned into an obsession, that turned into a business. And so I get to spend a lot of time normally, not maybe this year, but normally spend a lot of time with incredible people in the industry. Virtually every single person in the whiskey industry from all brands are lovely. There's only, you know, a very, 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 very small amount who are not the most affable, but at the same time, near enough everyone, if you've had a meeting or you bump into them or a show, you inevitably end up going for a beer or a whiskey or something and just chatting. Even if you haven't seen each other for a few years, or if you've only met for the first time, you pretty much know each other digitally anyway, so it's not the hardest thing to get talking. And yes, so we try a lot of casks and a lot are rejected. So there's a lot of very small samples of casks that are knocking around the office somewhere. I'm very bad at tidying my office samples, to be honest. And yeah, when they're rejected, they just they actually end up either being very small, so you just drink them anyway, or they go into the infinity bottles, which are behind the laptop here. So that's one of the GreatDrams infinity bottles, started in 2017. And yeah, so they don't get wasted, they just end up being somewhere else. People preferring this one than the first, fair play. Port Dundas has a bit more about it, says Steve. Some weird pop-ups. Let's see. Some saying it's a bit too sharp, Girvan a bit smoother. I would agree with that. But that sharpness for me, I really like, through that kind of citrus sharpness. There's a ton more comments, so it's just not. Jono saying you never visit me anymore. You know what, mate? Even when this is over, let's not bother. Although you have got an icon above your name, Mr. Wilson, saying you're a top fan, so we must be doing something right. Will we be visiting the Whisky Show, London, this year? It's dependent on if any of us are allowed out of our houses again. Greg, okay, Jono, I hope that's true, what you just responded to me. And let's see, any other questions before we move on to the next one? He was saying Port Dundas is a grower, that's cool. How about any other English whiskies from the new lot? Any Bimber, asks Chris. Shilton says, hey Shilton, a fellow Liverpool fan. And also one of the people I was mentioning just now is an absolute diamond of the industry. He represents all things Paul John, Indian whiskey, and we've met at so many shows, been to Anfield together and hung out, all because we had a whiskey together. It's just how friendships are made in this industry, which is awesome. To answer Chris's question though, in terms of new English, there's not many that have mature stock that is available on the market to buy. And any that are publicly selling them, it's going to take years until they're mature. So we're not really looking at that just yet, but it is definitely on the list. I'd also love to release an American whiskey, and we were within a whisker, an actual whisker, of releasing a 14-year-old single cask bourbon last year, and then it fell through at the last minute because they couldn't work out how to ship it over here, even though we put them in touch with a haulier, and it just fell through. So it's a real shame. Callum's just joined. Hello, Callum. Alan was very kind with his comment, saying I was an absolute gent at Whisky Live Dublin. Agreed. Let's hope there is one this year and we can all go to it. Right, I think I've caught up mostly. Eddie, English whiskies being traitorous. You're about to try one in 3 whiskies time, so let's hope that's wrong. Hopefully you'll like the Port Dundas. And we're going to move on now to a blended batch, or blended cask series, batch number 2. It's this guy right here. It's a 7-year-old. It's 7 because the youngest component is 7 years old. So what happens when you're creating any single malt or any blend is that by law, the number or the age on the bottle is the age of the youngest component. So it used to be the case decades ago where distillers and blenders would put together a blend, have a drop of a 25-year-old in, and they'd call it a 25-year-old whiskey. But to protect consumer rights and transparency to a degree, the SWA, the Scotch Whisky Association, who holds us all to account, decreed that only the youngest age of a blend can ever be declared on a bottle. So with ours, for example, it says 7 on here because the youngest component is, and then what is actually true is that the grain component, so there's only 3 components, 3 components to this. One single grain and 2 single malts. All 3 have been matured in 3 different casks from 3 different distilleries and have been brought together into this whiskey. Only 250 bottles produced, and it's a 13-year-old from the North British distillery, and the Glenmurray component is 11 years old, and then the Knockdhu distillery component, which is the 7-year-old one, is a first fill ruby port wine barrique. And the actual port component is knockout. Absolutely knockout. Apologies. And when that component on its own, it may or may not be one of our forthcoming releases. But when creating a blend, so I create the recipe personally. It's my responsibility and accountability. And so what typically happens is in 100ml bottles, like these guys right here, I put together several different pilot blends. So what we call pilot blends are how you describe a like drafts. They're work in progress. And so you start with a spreadsheet, which is monumentally dull, and you work out the proportions, what amount of liquid's available, and you work out what levels you think may create something lovely. And in my head, I always have a flavour brief in mind. So for the Christmas blend, obviously released at Christmas, it's sold out in 9 days, which is bonkers. I wanted to create the taste of Christmas in a glass. And I hope for those who have tried it and own it, you'd agree that it did actually come out pretty close to that. With this one, I wanted something a bit fruitier, a bit more uplifting, a bit fresher as we move into spring and summer. And that was also had enough body to it to take soda, so it works amazingly well in highballs, so soda and whiskey sodas. And so, you know, everyone should drink whiskey as they like, by the way. I can almost feel the burn of comments saying adding soda to it. But reality is, if you're smiling when you're drinking whiskey, everyone's winning. So however you want to do it, do it. If you put water in it, absolutely fine. If you put soda in it, ginger, Coke, less so. But some whiskies come alive with it. If you're going to have a whiskey and Coke, and it's something that I do mention to, or did mention to the Poynton Whiskey Club a while ago, really try to think about it a couple of hours ahead of time and open a can of Diet Coke, let it go flat, and then have it, well, I would have it in a Glen glass myself, but 50-50, so 50ml, 50ml of flat Coke, and a smoky whiskey called a Smoky Cokey, and it is divine. Just lobbing that one out there. But more importantly, let's get back to the blend. So I said only 250 bottles produced, and similarly to Port Dundas, it was only released a few weeks ago. So you're amongst the first people to be trying this, really, and I hope you like it. It's 46.2 ABV. For me, on the nose, you're getting lovely, that port cask just sings through those berries, almost a waxy note. Berries, the fruitiness, hopefully for you as well as me, is coming alive. Also a nice vanilla note, owing to the Glenmorangie component. And then all kind of wrapped together in a sweeter, almost Demerara sugar type note, owing to the 13-year-old North British that is within here. I'm hugely biased, obviously, but I really like this. And it's come alive, having 2 malt components and 1 grain component, kind of shifted the balance from being the smoothest kind of whiskey that you'd have with the Girvan style influence, if you had that in a blend, to being of quite full body, but also light enough to be able to drink a few of them responsibly, and enjoy it. And it should take water well. So we'll try that with a bit of water as well. Alright. So for me, the water actually mutes the nose slightly. But, oh, just came as I was about to sip it. A lovely orangey note, like zesty note coming through now. More of a, what's that? Yeah, like lemon and orange zestiness. And it smooths it out even further. So let's see what you guys are thinking. Stuart has asked, what was the blend for this again? I think you're asking about the components. So it's a 13-year-old North British cask, an 11-year-old, there's 11 actually, no, I think it ticked over to 12 when I was putting it in. Oh no, it was 11, it was turning 12 a few weeks later. 11-year-old Glenmorangie bourbon cask, first fill bourbon cask, and then a 7-year-old first fill Ruby Port Barrique from the Knockdo Distillery. Yeah, I agree with Paul. I don't think it does need any water. Cara, loving it with soda. Thank you very much. Yeah, that apple character, Gary, definitely from the Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie for me is all about that fresh apple orchardiness. Absolutely love the stuff. Tom says his favourite so far. Mark, the price on this one is £45. On the website, it's got free delivery as well. Anything over 45 quid has free delivery. Let's see. A slight tobacco taste. Interesting. Quite a few people saying it's their favourite so far. Plums, says Lindsay. Fantastic. Parsnips from Graham and Eddie. Interesting. Not sure where that's coming from, but we'll shove a like on that comment. Highball for sure, says Andy, Mr. Flat, the amateur drama, and a very good friend of ours. Excellent. Cool. Okay, just before I go into the next one, just to double check all the tech is working properly, be responsible with it. Marvellous. Alright, nervous of saying anything positive about technology until we get to the end, but we'll do it. Andy Clark says 45 quid, good value. Thank you very much, sir, truly appreciated. Quite sweet, the blended cask, says Carl, that makes sense. Fred Nunn, nice, I'll have a bottle, aces. Very easy sipping, got a great palate on it, thank you very much. Superb. Awesome. And still 158 of you watching this, which is phenomenal. No one seemingly has got too bored of my dulcet southern London tones. Excellent. So, number 4 is from the Glentauchers Distillery. Let's see if you, hopefully that works. I'm going to look at the screen as I'm holding this one up to make sure that you can actually see it. There you go. Only 203 bottles of this one ever produced, and it's distilled in June 2009, bottled the 1st of October last year. And so for us, Glentauchers, I mean, I absolutely love it. It's got a oh, there's a question. Interesting. Someone thinks there's a bit of ginger on the blend with a bit of water. Fair play. Cool. So for us, apologies. The Stuart King says he had a few bottles of this at Christmas. God bless you, sir. Well done. Glentauchers I actually love as a distillery. Not open to the public, but fortunately I have been for obvious reasons. And it's one of the last near totally manual distilleries there is. It's all very hands-on, very proper. It's where it's owned by Pernod Ricard, who own Chivas, so Chivas Brothers Limited. And it's where they send their production folks to go and learn how to operate a distillery properly. And it just had this amazing feel to it. And I've loved Tauchers for years, and buy single casks of it from other producers, and also their distillery collection that comes out from Chivas every year or two, depending on the year. And or if I see it, I always buy it because I just love the stuff. And so this one, it's 10-year-old, and this is single cask, single malt Scotch whiskey. And I just fell in love with it, had to have it, and then we released it. So for me, lots of sweet fruits on the nose, like like when you're going through a pick and mix at a cinema. Oh yeah, we used to do that, people. We used to all do that. And those kind of sweety fruits, if that makes sense, the synthetic-y sweet fruits, like those foam bananas. Please tell me you all love those. That kind of thing is coming through, really fruity, really live, really, you'll see it more on the mouthfeel, but I do kind of get it on the nose. Bit of a creamy note to it as well, but for me the creamy texture on the palate is just incredible. Jono's saying this is so fresh and light. Alan got a bottle of the distillery collection. Definitely worth cracking open, fella. It was 2 years ago. I have a feeling I have that one, or had that one and finished it. I'm just looking at the shelf where it would be and I cannot see it. It was just amazing, like really amazing. I believe it was a 14-year-old, but I can't remember totally offhand. People getting notes of sherbet, fruit salad. Adam Birch says it's the business. Could take in the nose of this all evening. Likewise, I could just nose this guy for hours. Much deeper taste. Lemons, strawberries, and oranges, Philip. Yes, I totally see that. That kind of, those lovely summer fresher fruits. Yes. Again, bottled at 48.2% ABV. Personally, I don't add water to this one, but do try it. I'll put in something in a minute just to have a go. Helen, very creamy, fruity on the nose, fruity and spicy on the palate. Excellent. Easily the best so far, says Jim. My wife asked for more of this one. It's a winner, says Mr. Bishop, a good friend of ours. Lots of people saying this is their favourite. Popcorn and ginger. I really like it, says Paul. Feels more complex, says Kevin. And so I'd answer that. Oh, I almost put an angry face on that for no reason. Yes, it feels more complex because single malt is done in batches. And so malt whiskey has to use malted barley and be done in batches on those gorgeous copper stills that are like the postcard stills you think of when you think of distilling and Scotland and all of that kind of stuff. Grain whiskey, which is what the first two were, they're distilled on what's called a column still. So it's like, they all differ, but say 10 stories high. They're really big. Column, continuous, Kofi still, all the same thing, near enough. Slight tweaks, but realistically the same process. So they're huge. They never turn off, hence continuous distillation is the type of distillation they are. And they create more of a mellow, lighter, smoother spirit, whereas the amount of copper contact within the batch production of single malt means that you get some really light fruity esters and flavour profiles, but you also get more depth, more, more more character, for want of a better word. But then they're also more complex, so a lot of people find them harder to actually drink because they are more complex in flavour profile and character, which is also why we always try and have grain and single malt within our range, so that there's something for everyone. And if you're more on the smooth side, there's the grain, and then if you want the other side, we've got the single malt. And this one, yeah, I mean, I absolutely love it, obviously. Only 203 bottles. It's Glentauchers Distillery, and see, I haven't actually read the back label for a couple of months, genuinely, and I really am being serious. And it gives off memories of penny sweets coming through with a juicy green apple note and a smooth, fruity and creamy palate with a slightly spicy finish. Oh, it's almost like I know what I'm talking about. Madness. All right, let's see if there's any other comments. Okay. Would you put flat coke in this? Do you know, I've never tried it, Graham, but I'm always up for having a go. Fortunately, I'm the one with the tasting stock, so I'm allowed to do that. Stuart says no, just Lagavulin. Lagavulin 16 with flat coke is absolutely divine. Reminds me walking through an orchard when the fruit is perfectly ripe, says Matthew. I like stealing underripe apples, says Stuart. I need a bottle of this, please, says Matthew. I can always arrange that. And Christian, like velvet, creamy and smooth as it swirls around in the mouth. Excellent. Let me just, oh, hold on, there's a question. How much of the flavour comes from the spirit and how much from the cask, Mr. Bennett? Excellent. Just so you all know, so far, all of the whiskies you've tried are available to buy on GreatDrams.com, obviously. As I said, the Girvan, there really is only a couple of those left. So if you're interested in that, definitely be quick. Port Dundas and the other two, we've got a decent stock at the minute. But then the last one, there's just 2 bottles left. One of which is that one right there, and one of which is already in bubble wrap in the storeroom. So to answer that question, the spirit itself, just to explain very briefly the process of distillation and flavour creation within whiskey. The spirit itself goes into each cask clear, completely clear. 100% of the colour from ours, as we mentioned earlier, ours are all natural colour, comes from the wood. Absolutely all of it. Goes in clear, comes out whatever colour you can see in front of you. Then, when it comes to flavour, it's a bit contentious. People have different viewpoints depending on where you work within the industry and what part of the process. Are you a master blender or a distiller or whatever? But the general consensus is that the wood gives a hell of a lot of flavour to it, obviously. But what I think Mr. Hislop, Sandy Hislop from Shivers, once explained it to me really nicely, that the flavour notes you get at the end when a whiskey is bottled, they were there at the beginning, and the wood and the management of how you kind of use the different wood types and the different age and the different blending techniques is the genius in that is how you tease out those flavour profiles to become the character of that whiskey. So the flavour was always there, it just needs teasing out through the wood, through time, through mellowing, through all of those other things that happen during the maturation process. But new make, so fresh, clear spirit, of which I think it's all down, no, here it is. We have some lovely new make samples here. Even, sorry you can't try these, I won't be trying, I'll be nosing at them. So that's from the Ilah Distillery on Ilah. Very fortunate to have this. And you already get that amazing smoke from it, and you get that kind of grassiness that comes through like a 12-year-old Ilah, for example. It's there already, it just needs nurturing and maturing into the final product. New Make Spirit, I'd always, be careful of the ABV. But New Make Spirit for me has an amazing flavour profile, and we actually use it in cocktails at home quite a bit. So if doing an old fashioned, for example, we use half the whiskey content will be New Make, and the other half will be a different whiskey, depending on which one I feel like I'm in the mood for. Also, a few of you asking about buying again. We'll be posting the links at the end, and I'll send you all a follow-up email tomorrow. So, or feel free to buy tonight, and we'll get it shipped out ASAP. Let's see. Stuart saying for him the water wrecked the Glentauchers. Fair enough. In that case, I won't put water in mine. Peated New Make is absolutely amazing, says Alan. And do you have a preferred cask or wood type? That's an awesome question. Cask type, I like. It's a rubbish joke. An awful joke about big sherry butts, but never mind. I actually I lean towards the sherry cask matured whiskies myself, but I love all of them. Can't obviously love them equal, but I broadly like pretty much every whiskey for different reasons. What I will say is that with sherry casks, you have a real nice colour to them, which adds to the kind of experience and all of that. But it also, with them, depending if it's PX for the sweeter side or Oloroso for the more fruitier and winter kind of spice note there's a real something quite interesting. But I prefer sherry hogsheads to be really awkward. So the sherry casks that we have made especially for us, so we've just had 2 made this week actually. Awful timing, given that we can't now fill them or finish anything in them for a while, as all the warehouses are shut, the warehouse and bottling and refilling stuff is shut. We've got 1 PX and 1 Oloroso, both first fill, and they're at the 250-ish litre volume, because for me it gives more oak contact to be able to have a much more interesting finish without having to wait years and years for it. So we actually bought an 8-year-old full-term matured cask back end of last year, beginning of this year, which has been in there 8 years in a sherry butt, so in a 500 litre sherry butt, and the colour, it was just off New Make. It hadn't taken anything from the wood. It was a dead cask, but we were not privy to that, and it was one where we had to move really quickly and there were no samples, so we said let's do it. So part of that will be finished in a PX cask, and then the other part will continue its maturation journey to see what happens with it, and then we'll make more assessments later. But my favourites would be sherry cask, but in the kind of bourbon cask size almost, if that makes sense. But a good first fill bourbon cask that's really potent, really aggressive, can do amazing things to New Make Spirit and create wonderful whiskies. Actually, the bottle your own, I don't know if it must still be on actually, because I only bought a couple of those a few weeks ago, I think. It all kind of blurs nowadays. The first fill bourbon cask at the Aberfeldy Distillery, which is in the, I think it was in the gift shop, one of the bottle your owns. Absolutely stunning. And yeah, I was blown away by it, so I ended up getting a couple more because it was absolutely superb. So it all depends on my mood, what I'm feeling like at the time, and how things just kind of evolve, and who you're with, time of day, all that kind of stuff. All right, any other questions? Does the lightness or darkness determine the taste? Not really, Gavin. Great question. The darkness, again, it really depends on the whiskey, and if it's a really dark whiskey like that one I showed earlier, which was the 2-year-old, yes, that means it's got a heavy sherry influence to it. But if it's a commercial large brand release that's dark, it may also just have the colour added to it, so you don't always know. One thing that I always point out is how light Ardbeg, pretty much all Ardbegs, apart from the sherry cask matured ones or the Ugadal and Corryvreckan, but all the limited editions, even up to their 20-something-year-old. I was having a couple of those with my father-in-law Tom last year at some point, and the colour was just so light, but the flavour, the depth, the quality was off the charts. Absolutely amazing. So for me, colour doesn't really matter. If they've had no colour added to it, you can tell if it's a sherry cask or a bourbon cask, obviously. So colour helps in that respect. But if it's a bigger brand, then it doesn't always say. I was in M&S once at, where was it, at Waterloo Station. I was in a rush, so I didn't have time to get any slides out to kind of fill this guy in on anything. But I was buying a bottle of whiskey for the train, as you do. And I said, oh, what do you guys have? I just want to get something interesting. It was only a few years ago. And this guy, the manager actually, as I had chosen one that was more interesting to me than others, he said, oh, you don't want that. You want the darker one. Darker means better. And I just looked at him, like, mate, I wish I had half an hour to explain to you the complexities of cask maturation and why colour doesn't always mean better. But instead I had 4.5 minutes and had to run. But anyway, it's not always an exact science, so to speak. So, any other questions? I just saw one pop up. Oh, where's it gone? People getting vanilla, like creamy vanilla, dried fruits, a more oaky vanilla, spicy palate from Helen. Very cool. Which distillery is number 5 from? We're not there, Simon. We're not there yet. We'll get there in a second, but it's from the London Distillery. Matthew says he's on it in the garden. It's a shame though, at the end I won't have a pick of the one I like. Matthew, I have a feeling you might actually own a few of these, truth be told. And has anyone said I look like Nick Frost? You have, Malcolm. You have. Don't think anyone else has either, or ever before. Let's see, any other questions popping up? Replying to Alistair. Alistair's got a question. Oh, what's your favourite distillery you visited? Oh, very, very good question. I think you had a follow-up. Let me just double check. So it's scrolling way too quickly. I can't find it now. Favourite distillery I have visited is... that's really tough. Lefroy, I think it was one of the most amazing ones. My amazing wife Kirsty actually bought me a week on Ilah for my 30th, and so we went there. It's my 29th. We went there and it was the week after the Ilah festival, and so part of it was on the Monday we had what they call the Water to Whisky tour. I have a bit of my non-alc beer because my throat is tickling. All this talking. And yes, the Water to Whisky tour. I think at the time, I don't know what it is now. I haven't had to look it up for ages. It was about 82 quid each. So not a cheap tour, but bear with me. As part of it, you get there, you go to the shop, obviously to check in. They say, oh, what do you want to try? And you say, oh, whatever, be polite, just say whatever you've got. Then they reveal, we've got everything. You can try it all for free. So we obviously did. Right up to their 25-year-old. And then do a tour of the distillery. Obviously amazing, like a pilgrimage. Selfies with the stills, all that kind of jazz. Pre-beard as well, so they all look like I'm 12 years old. And then you end up walking into the hills nearby to the water source for Lefroy with a mini Glencairn. I don't think I've got any of those with me. Sorry, I keep lots of different glassware around just in case I get asked about it. Well, not that one. So you get one of those, you dink it into the water, it's all muddy, sheep have obviously been in their business in there. But you try it, because it's the water source for Lefroy, one of the most amazing distilleries on the planet. And then you have lunch, and lunch, every single item was infused with Lefroy at some point, and in some way. And whilst you're there, you have like a Lefroy 18 or something like that. Then you walk back, get in the, Land Rovers, over to the peat bogs, and then you actually cut your own peat, so you're actually cutting from the Lefroy peat bog for a while, which is harder than it looks actually, a lot harder. Tools are weird, never seen them before or since. Obviously take a little break, have another Lefroy 18 just to keep you going. Then you go back to the distillery, and then in their little warehouse opposite the shop, 3 casks. You actively draw your own samples from each of the 3 casks, try all 3. Your favourite, you get to bottle a 200ml bottle of it to take home with you. And I still have the bottle that Kirsty did and the one that I did. because it was just a phenomenal experience. And yeah, it was incredible. Trying to think of some others. Aberfeldy, I've mentioned them before, but that is without a shadow of a doubt one of my top distilleries. I've been very fortunate to spend a hell of a lot of time there, and absolutely love it. The team there are lovely. You know, apart from Jono, he's a bit weird, but the others are superb. And let's think. Oh, Ilah. Ilah is an absolute belter. If you can imagine a distillery on a postcard, that is Ilah. It just looks quaint, beautiful. The flowers, although I hate flowers because I'm a depreciating asset, which make no sense. And I've got a hay fever. The flowers always look amazing. It looks like if you take any photo of it, you're just going to have a stunning photo. Plus their blending lab that they opened about 1.5 years ago. Neil McDonald was behind, actually. He's a really good guy. That is an amazing distillery experience. So if you ever get to do that, really superb. I think that's a decent top 3. Glenfiddich's always stunning to visit. I should always remember them. Their bar has got some bonkers whiskey in it. And the food, the lunch there, stunning. Just trying to think if there's any others that I need to mention very quickly, if I can remember them off the top of my head. If you're over in Ireland, the Jameson Distillery experience in Dublin is really cool, totally revamped, redesigned, and looks the absolute nuts. And the Middleton experience down in Cork is a belter. And Teeling, of course, stunning distillery, great whiskey, awesome bar, and a great team there as well. I think that covers most of my favourites. I'm bound to upset someone by not including them, but they are definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite distilleries to visit. The video glitch when I said the price of the Lefroy tour, it was 82 or 86 quid when we did it, but that was back in, I don't even know when it was. It was a while ago, probably about 6-7 years ago. What do I think of Springbank, says Kevin, or asks Kevin. I love it. Really cool. I have a few special bottles from there. And we visited the distillery actually. Must have been 3.5 to 4 years ago when Kirsty was pregnant. Ouch. So she was doing all the driving, and I got her GreatDrams, and they were my dinner each night. We did a few distilleries on that trip, and yeah, they a really cool distillery, and you can actually do a week there, learning how to distill, fill casks, all of that kind of stuff. Springbank, I don't really know what it's called, but I've heard people do it, and they've had a really great time. Not cheap, but it's supposed to be really cool. Well worth looking at. Oh, sorry, Glengoyne. That is also one of our favourites. We did that together in 2014 or 15, I think, and superb. If you're ever there, ask for the tour guide, Ali. He's an ex-cop, and wears phenomenal tartan trousers, and he was just so much fun. Made us feel so welcome, so happy. And it was, yeah, I always wanted to recommend that after that experience. So, let's see, any other questions to hit? People loving Springbank. We're not on number 5 yet, William. We're about to get there. If you want to grab your number 5 now, this is from the London Distillery. Apologies. And so pull this up here. London Distillery, and I bought this cask. When was it? Well, when it was being, when they were filling their first casks. So London Distillery Company in London. Being a Londoner, I had to have it. And it was laid down on the 9th of September 2015. I think I bought it the year before that. And it's only a 3-year-old, so brace yourself. And it's a, let me just go to the detail here, barley type, plumage archer, yeast type distillers, and Whitbread B. And it was in a 20-litre ex-bourbon cask. And it was the first London single malt in the capital since the early 1900s, which is pretty much why I got the cask. And yeah, as I said, there's only a couple of bottles left of the 28 that I got from that cask. Yeah, so here we go. Now, I must say, I mean, if some of you have dived in, fair play, but I must say this one, for me, works immeasurably better with water, because it is at 63.3% ABV. So brace yourself, nose it and try it without water, but save a significant amount to try with water, I would say. So for me, a really strong kind of rye note, kind of spicy. Lots of wood, like pencil shavings, that kind of notes coming through. So quite dry, bit of berry note coming through too. I have to say, it's a nice nose, especially for a 3-year-old. But for me, it's like almost singeing the nostrils. It's got such a high ABV to it. On my palate, strong, but it has got quite floral notes, but spicy. As I said, I'm going to add water to mine, just to kind of bring that guy to life. A bit more water than I did to the others. We've still got 149 of you. That is phenomenal, considering I've been whittling on about whiskey for 70 minutes now. So thank you all again for taking part and being involved. Now for me, adding the water definitely opens it up for this one and brings it to life. I've taken mine down to about the 52% ABV mark. And now for that, even at that ABV, it's easy drinking, spicy, fruitier, kind of juicy oakiness to it. A lot of char kind of character coming through. See, I really like it when it's had water added to it. Like it's an exceptional whiskey for its age, and yeah, do enjoy it. And tell me, have any of you actually ever tried a whiskey this young? What do you think of this one? And any other questions about it? And I will try and flick through and answer. Lovely finish on this. Kevin's really loving it. Colour on this one is beautiful, that is true. Cheers Darren, you're doing great lad. Thanks mate. Don't know why I did it in that accent, apologies. Steve says wouldn't be drinkable without water. I kind of tended to agree on this. This one has an E in it. Are you trying about the whiskey? I don't think so. No, on the label it doesn't have, no, it's whiskey spelled the Scotch way. Not sure what that comment meant, apologies. Tom, only one left now, Greg, saving it for when we win the league. God knows when that will be, my friend. Can I ask why it, Andy, sorry, I'm trying to get the comment thread here. Oh, here we go. Can I ask why it needs to be looked at? Do you feel that the packaging devalues the experience in some way, rather than it almost being an insider's club thing who don't drink the packaging? Let me just see what the original comment to that was. There's a response to Alan somewhere. I can't see it. I'll go back and have a look at that. But just to answer that point about Johnny, you can buy that one on the GreatDrams shop right now. I've just seen something flash up. I think there is only one left. Just to answer that part about packaging, I believe that packaging is as fundamental as the flavour profile. Again, biased because I work in the whiskey industry as a brand consultant as well as all of this stuff. So I work on packaging with brands, what their message is, how it's designed, how the visual look and feel of a brand is. But packaging plays such a huge and important role. Without it, they'd all look the same, all be in the same standard bottle, same standard label. And how would you choose between brands? How would you bring the character of a whiskey to life? How would you tell the stories that go with those whiskies? And also, you've got to remember that not all people who buy whiskey are able to try it before they buy it. So packaging, what I always say, packaging is any whiskey brand's silent brand ambassador, and because it's the thing that is tangible, it lets people touch it, feel the textures, feel the kind of depth of everything that is around the liquid, tells the stories, has the logo mark, has reassurance, has flavour descriptors, and then only once people try it, and that's why it has to go in tandem with amazing whiskey. Once they try it, the liquid should get sale number 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But oftentimes, packaging is the thing that draws people in to be able to buy it. Different for whiskey geeks like myself, although I often buy things basically because they're beautiful. But if, in terms of whiskey that is, I literally don't buy anything else. Occasionally food, or light tonic to go into gin. But yeah, for most people who are not at that kind of alpha geek of whiskyness, they're going to be looking at a bottle, they're going to be reading it, they're going to need to feel like what they're spending a lot of money on is actually going to be an amazing experience for them. Or if they're gifting it, which a high proportion of whiskey buyers are buying it for a gift, they want to know that the person receiving it is going to enjoy it and value it. So packaging has got a massive, massive part to play. Loving the trainers, says Billy. Awesome. Didn't know anyone was going to see those. I thought the camera was angled just above them. But yeah, they're my red Liverpool trainers. Let's see, there was a couple other questions. Gavin had one. If they left this in cask 3-year-old for another 7 years, what would change about the taste? Great question. Unfortunately, due to how it worked with ownership, wasn't the greatest experience of owning this one because it was a third party. It wasn't brought into ours, hence why it doesn't look like the rest of our range. It was a private cask owned by me. We were not allowed to mature it further than the 3 years. It was just bottled at 3. So we won't know, but what I would probably say is because it was such a small cask, you'd end up losing a hell of a lot through evaporation and it kind of soaking into the wood. So you'd lose a lot of liquid, but then also I think it would have mellowed out slightly, but you'd end up having more oak contact, so it'd be more rich. It'd actually potentially not be as easy to drink with water, but I do think it'd be more of a mellower whiskey overall, and the ABV would come down quite a bit, I think, to about the mid-50s over that time, or maybe mid to late 50s. And then from there, you'd have more of a chance of it having a broader spectrum of flavour profiles, if that makes sense. Let's see what other questions we have. Right, a little bit of abuse now for the Liverpool trainers. Thank you very much. Jono's saying it's really minty and herbal. Hopefully he's forgiven my comment about him being weird at the distillery. Let's have a look. The Hague bottle was being mentioned as an example for packaging. Now it'd be interesting, a Hague bottle itself, I mean, it's way too wide. It has all kinds of functional issues. When it goes on shelf, it's too wide, it takes up double bottle width. So a lot of retailers were merchandising or stocking it sideways, didn't have brand on the side, so people weren't buying it. But Hague Clubman, which is the narrower one, shorter one, actually did it, well, they both have done phenomenally well. Helps having David Beckham as an investor in it. Not a brand, not a kind of, what do you call it? Not like an ambassadorial role, although he does perform that role. He was an investor as well as being involved in it. So not just a sponsorship, that's the word I was looking for. Him and a good friend, Ewan Gunn, who's got one of the most fabulous names in whiskey, if not more, travelled the world, mostly Asia, with Hague, and it really, or Hague Club, and it really was engaging. And the food pairings, the easy drinkingness of it, but the bottle itself, a lot of people say it's like an aftershave bottle, but you know, it's chunky, the stopper's lovely. Personally, I think it's a really cool piece of kit. I think I do still have one, so yes, I have one over there in a presentation case. It's, you know, I think they did a really good job actually, personally. Oh, Stephen has asked, give me 1 second to read it. On the London private cask, it mentions rye on the website, but then it says single malt on the label. Generally single malts are made from barley. Can you expand on this? So with this one, let me just see where the detail was on here. I don't think it's on here. No. With this one, because it's not Scotch, it doesn't necessarily have to have follow the same SWA rules as Scotch whisky would have, to either be to be malted barley for single malt or any type of grain for grain whisky. So each country kind of has their own rules. So America, corn and 51% been in their mash bill or recipe for it to be bourbon and all of that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to follow that because there's no real rules in England yet. They're all broadly following Scotch guidelines, Scotch whisky guidelines, but there's no 100% English Whisky Association. So they're allowed to do pretty much what they want. With that, let's see, what else have we got? So that actually takes us to the end of the tasting. 143 of you have stuck with it to the end. Thank you so much. We've all tried them all. We'll still take questions for a few minutes, so feel free to keep asking, and I will still be here talking to my phone. And I will read and try and answer at the same time. But just to finish off with telling you that all the whiskies from tonight are available on the website. So have a look if you're interested in them. All limited edition, all individually numbered. So get involved. And then also what we're doing is another tasting from our archive. So including the Invergordon and Craigellachie that we mentioned earlier on, as well as some other archival ones, including our Ben Riach, which is our smoky one, which we didn't have here, as well as a totally new release, which is this one right here, which I'm not going to tell you any more about, apart from it's our oldest yet, and it's a blended malt. There you go. And very heavily sherry influenced. And that will be on April the 22nd, and we'll actually be doing our last shipping for that on Tuesday, I think. So just to give us some time, if you were interested, definitely get involved, because that one actually has very finite amounts of liquid, because as I said, it's from the archive, and most of them are gone. So yeah, when that one's full, that is totally full. And let's see what other things I should mention. I think that's pretty much it, really. Apart from just to thank you even more times for getting involved, trying the GreatDrams products, and with so much great chat and great questions as well. I hope you've enjoyed, if not all of them, some of them, even one of them, and that would make me happy anyway. And I hope it's broken up the somewhat monotony of our lockdown / isolation / whatever the hell is going on right now. And frankly, for me, this being in the calendar with a one-day reminder actually helped me remember what day it was this week, because they all seem to merge to pretty much all the same. Anyway, thank you again, and let me have a look through the questions, and I'll keep answering as we go through until about past. Thank you very much, Matthew, for your really kind words. Let's see. Cara has asked, do you think there's a golden thread ABV? Maybe one to... oh, sorry, it keeps flashing up. Maybe one to start at... that shows whiskey's character more. Sure. So for me, if you look at the market and the whiskey category as a whole, a vast majority of them are at 40% ABV, because that is the legal minimum for whiskey. Anything from the Freud 10, although it tastes often a lot higher than that, because it's quite potent, quite medicinal. Like your Glenfiddich 12, your Glenlivet 12, all the kind of classics are around the 40 ABV. For me, and also for quite a few other writers in the industry, I'm talking about your kind of Ian Buxtons and various other people that we kind of, every now and then we get together. Normally it's Spirit of Speyside, which sadly was cancelled this year, and have a little natter about things that annoy us or things that we like and all that. For us, 46 ABV is the kind of what we feel should be roughly the minimum, because it adds a level of mouthfeel and texture and character that 40 ABV often doesn't, and it almost guarantees a level of character and texture. Anything higher than that can be quite harsh to some people, especially when you get into the 50s. But 46 for me is that's the dart that kind of goes through everything, and it brings out, again, for me personally, the perfect distillery character at a minimum. Then you go to single casks and cask strength and all of that, and you kind of graduate through. But 46 would be where I would start, and kind of where we did. Chris, very, very kind of you to say such kind words. Thank you. And actually for a lot of the next few comments, thank you very much. That is incredibly kind. Tim, beer soon. My friend, I would absolutely love one. How about we do a virtual one soon? That would be epic. Gary replying to Matthew, which I was about to say actually, the highest you can distill to is 94.8. For malt distilling, you'd only get to the low 70s, really. But there's no law for bottling strength, but generally the ABV is reduced to 63.5 before filling casks anyway. And this is a story I probably shouldn't tell, but I was once on a stag do good friend of mine's stag do, actually my solicitor's stag do, old solicitor's stag do. Not because of what happened on the stag, but anyway. We were in Berlin for 2 days, absolutely epic. And I was then having to go immediately to a press trip that started on a Sunday, which is the very first time and only time it's ever happened. And so Berlin, Friday, Saturday, it was carnage. And then first thing on Sunday, I think it was about 6:30, I flew to London to fly to Glasgow, I think it was, and then on to Girvan. And I was obviously not in the happiest place of my life. And so I text Kevin, Mr. Abrook, ahead of time, just said, my friend, I'm a little bit skew-whiff, so bear with me and be gentle with me on night 1, please. And so when I got there, he said, just try this, mate. Flung over a Glencairn with a clear liquid. I assumed it's a gin or something. They said, just don't think about it, just drink it. So I had it. It lit up my mouth, my face. It was like people would have thought I was a letterbox. So I went totally red. I thought, what the hell is that? That, my friend, is 94% spirit straight off the still. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I have to say that 10 minutes later, back in the game. Do not ever do that yourself. Drink responsibly, please. And let's see, what else have we got going on? Thanks, Angela, saying I look like Frankie Boyle. I haven't sworn yet, and I've been very cognizant of that. Awesome, David, you're in for the 22nd already. I like that. Thank you, everyone, for such amazing comments, by the way. They're really kind. Such lovely, lovely feedback and everything. Oh, you're so kind. Let's see, what else? I will hit up any of the other kind of private messaging. I will get back to you either tonight or more likely tomorrow now. Because frankly, I fancy a drink and maybe a gin. Stephen, thank you. Nice one, Greg. Educational enjoyment and new tastes reaching their Facebook. Oh, you met me at Tatton Foodies last year. Marvellous. More of a bourbon drinker, considered brandy, cask whiskey. What do you personally recommend? On bourbon, good question. I love bourbon. I'm by no means a bourbon expert, I don't think. If we just class American whiskey as a whole, because it's a much bigger category now than it used to be. For me, Stag is fantastic. Pinhook are doing amazing things. Balcones in Texas and their single malts and their baby blue, really quite smart. IW Harper, always quite interesting. Angel's Envy, of course. Let's see, have I got any others nearby? Oh, Heaven Hill and Widow Jane. They're probably the ones that I would be drinking more often. But then I like experimenting with different things. But those ones hopefully will be of some use. And let me know how you get on with them, by the way. Matthew, well, this has been my best night of lockdown. Hell yeah. Alan, my go-to gin. Bloody hell, that's a tricky one. That is a tricky one, actually. Electric Spirit, Electric's gin, founded by a lovely man called James Porteous. They're based in Edinburgh, and that's definitely our kind of go-to. Like when we want a special gin, it'll be that one. Apart from that, I actually like trying lots of different ones. And I try, what I do with whiskey as I do with gin, until this year, I'm very fortunate, I travel quite a lot. And I normally, through travel retail, or GTR as we call it in the trade, I buy a bottle of gin and a bottle of whiskey from wherever I go, and bring it back. So we try different things, often stuff that we will then not be able to buy more of. So yeah, I mean, as a go-to, it will probably be Electric's, Acrous, I think it's pronounced. It's the name of it. It's in a neon pinky orange bottle with a lovely stamp of a light bulb on there. But yeah, all the others are kind of one-off bottles that we have in, and then when they're gone, they're gone. So yeah, I'm not really one for dwelling and having the same gin over and over. Although I do really like the East London Liquor Companies, or ELLCs, gin. And then, do you know what? One of my absolute favourites is simply Beefeater. It gets knocked, it's price bashed constantly, but it is a true classic gin. And there's a reason it's been around for so long. So no, I'm a big fan of that, and often go back to that one, especially on trains. Let's see what else we've got. Billy, you got a bottle of Suntory Owl from Tokyo. You lucky man. I have been looking for that for the best part of a year and not been able to find it. What about Japanese? Bob is asking. My favourite Japanese whiskies are, well, Hibiki 17. It was actually the very first bottle of whiskey I bought for my whiskey collection. I still have it. I got a bottle and a half of it. The half was consumed within about a week with a friend, not just on my own. And the actual 17-year-old full-size bottle I've kept. I bought that in Tokyo, first time I went to Japan. But again, with Japanese, so many of them. Nika from the barrel, it's absolutely stunning. There's one, Kakubin, which is their kind of domestic standard blended Japanese, but it's amazing with soda. Like for me, Japanese whiskey is all about the highball and all of that. And the Hakushu 25-year-old, of course. And Christian, who was on here a minute ago, is a mutual fan of the Yamazaki 18-year-old. And he visited me actually a while back, and we shared a Yamazaki 18-year-old Mizunara cask. It was off the scale. Absolutely superb. So let's see, what other questions have we got? The AO, the Suntory AO, is not worldwide availability, but it is the worldwide blend. So unfortunately I can't get my hands on it, but I would love one. But I did try it actually in Shanghai in November. It was good. Let's see what else. What other questions have we got? Pom pom pom. Let's see. Billy's going to wear his Celtic trainers for the next one. Fair play, lad. Awesome. What else? I'm touched by that Frankie Boyle thing. That's a little bit cold. Cool. Lots of nice positive things. If there's any more questions, I'm going to be logging off and stopping this now. But if there's any more questions, put them in the thread and I'll go through tomorrow, and any I missed I'll answer. Or email me, greg@greatdrams.com, and I will always get back to you. Thank you again so much for taking the time to spend your evening with me. Hope it's been enjoyable, and hopefully see you, or you see me, on the 22nd as well for our archive tasting. Should be a good one. Cheers. And now I'm going to walk around there and press stop, so it's going to look weird for a second.